Are y'all ready to head off the trails? I'm the Cryptid Huntress, Jessica Jones, and I'm ready to take you on a mysterious journey right now. We welcome you to Off the Trails right here on Spaced Out Radio's YouTube channel. If you guys haven't hit subscribe yet, please do. We'd love to have you. And shout out to Bumblefoot for that awesome intro music once again. You guys can follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, on TikTok at Spaced Out Radio as well, and on Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show. I got it mixed up tonight, y'all. Okay, you can find me at thecryptidhuntress.com, and please subscribe to my amazing YouTube channel, The Cryptid Huntress. Also, visit my shop, War Woman Goods. That's on Etsy, and I'm having a big sale in my shop at the moment. So, well, I thought I had something to pull up, but it's War Woman Goods. That's all one word. Okay, so you guys go shop there. And also, I'm doing tarot card readings right now, personal private readings. So if you guys want one of those, y'all go to my website and sign up. Okay, that would be awesome. It supports what I do here, and it's a lot of fun. Okay, so I have another fantastic guest here with us tonight. I have Jason Mclean in the studio. Don't forget that right after this show, After Hours has an amazing program set up for you tonight. So let's get to our guest. Witness to a living pterosaur, author, illustrator, and biblical paranormal researcher, Jason Mclean has authored and illustrated numerous books, including How UFOs and Bigfoot Prove the Bible is True and Metroplex Monsters. He can be found on the SIRUpapers and Texas Front Porch channels on YouTube, where he's got a show, Jason Mclean Questions Everything, where he discusses cryptozoology, ufology, forbidden archaeology, and the paranormal. He also has a show on Tuesday nights called Mysterious Library. That's on Untold Radio AM. Okay. And so please help me welcome to the show, Mr. Jason Mclean.
Hey, Jessica.
Hey, old buddy.
Hey. Gotta love
Man.
the Bumblefoot. Gotta love the Bumblefoot intros, don't you?
Gotta love Bumblefoot. Yes, he's the musical mascot here at Spaced Out Radio. Yes.
Yep. Yeah.
Yes.
No. On Wednesdays, like I said, it's me, Bigfoot Michigan Rob, who I see is in the chat, and Donnie, and we're gonna get more people to come in and talk on our little panel where we question everything. And Tuesday nights, it's me and Dean. Like I said, we're having fun over here, having a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, that's what it's all about. Absolutely. Big Dog, thank you so much. That was before the show even started. You sent that super chat. You're amazing. Thank you.
Aw.
Shout out to Big Dog 5758. Yeah. Well, you know, I've done several shows with you, Jason. We've had a really good history of doing some really interesting shows with some interesting topics. Mm-hmm. And you never cease to blow my mind with your knowledge, especially biblical knowledge. And how that pertains to the paranormal. Yeah.
I try. And, you can't just be because I'm beautiful, man. You know, I got to bring something more to the table.
Well, you are beautiful. Yes, you're a beautiful soul as well. Okay. And so you are trying to give me a break from all of the carnage and the blood and all the craziness from the remote viewing targets I was doing when it came to people being ripped apart by Dogman.
Yeah.
And so you suggested that I do some more exciting, like light targets, like pterosaurs, for one of my shows. And so we did a show about modern day pterosaurs. Mm-hmm. And it's not just because you just had an interest in them. It's because you have actually seen one.
Yes. Yes, I have. Yeah. The quick, because I don't want to take up too much of the time because there's so much to talk about on this topic. The short version of this, 1992 summer, right? We're fishing in a creek. It's literally called the 10 Mile Creek. Again, Texans are great at a lot of things. Creative naming is not one of them, right? So surprisingly, it's a 10-mile long creek, but
original.
It runs. Yeah, original, exactly. It runs through South Dallas, Duncanville, DeSoto, Lancaster, Wilmer Hutchins. It meets up with the Trinity River. Now, it's a lot of the creeks in North Texas and Oklahoma will cut real. If it's a big enough creek, will cut real deep into the limestone bedrock that the entire, all of North Texas sits on. So we're in this creek that basically has like 15, 20 feet deep in most places. And it's real hard to get into. and we have what I call the green wall in North Texas, where, because of where the actual when it floods, it brings a lot of good soil there, so we have a lot of plant life there, and of course we mow right up to it, so it's hard to get into these places. My dog is terrified of this story because it's so scary.
The pterosaurs must be outside.
Exactly. So it's one of those things where it's hard to get into this creek, but we had a way into it, right? Because one of the walls had
Okay.
collapsed and made like a bank. So we were fishing all
Oh,
morning, and it's about 10:30. And so he's like, I'm gonna go up and grab lunch, and because the fish had stopped biting. So we're packing up. He's sort of the first out, and I'm going up the collapsed wall, and I just hit to the inside of this tree line when I hear something I've never heard before, right? It sounded like a bird, but it was very, very different. I'm like, what is that? So I turn around and I look because I could tell where it was coming from, right? Like I said,
mhm.
this creek essentially has these sheer cliffs on either side, all made out of limestone. So the sound echoes very well. So I turn around, I poke my head out from behind the tree line, and I see what I think is the biggest blue heron I've ever seen in my life, right?
Uh-huh.
And it had the right shape. It's that same color that a blue heron is, sort of that Payne's gray. And I
Mhm.
thought I saw, because sometimes herons will fly with their feet hanging behind them straight out. That's what I thought I was seeing. And then, and I'm watching because it's huge. It has an 8 to 10 foot wingspan. I'm like, this is way bigger than any blue heron I've ever seen. Well, it's gliding down and it gets right in front of me. Its right wingtip is 5 feet from my face, and it's got the S curve
Wow.
shape to the neck, the whole 9 yards. And I realize there are no feathers on this thing. And
Wow.
what I thought had been its feet sticking behind it was actually a long flanged tail. And I'm like, this is a friggin' pterosaur. And I just
Yeah.
watch it, and it just goes, and then it banks and disappears. And I don't talk about it for 20 years because I couldn't believe I saw it. Because
Wow. That
they
was so close too.
oh yeah, it's like I couldn't believe I saw this thing. In the worst part of it, during this time, I learned about the living pterosaurs that are seen in South Texas, right?
Okay.
I believe there were still living dinosaurs, but I couldn't believe I saw it in Dallas, Texas, because other people would have to see this. I would have heard about it. You couldn't keep something like this quiet. And if you'd asked me even a few years ago, I would have said, no, it didn't really impact my life. But looking
Okay.
back now, I can say, oh, no, it did, because this is why I'm open to cryptozoology. This is why I did a lot of the things I did. In fact, one of the first little booklets I wrote um, was using artwork throughout the centuries to show that ranforactoid pterosaurs have always been with us, that they are the wyverns of old, that they are that they are some of the dragons that are recounted. But
Mm.
but even during this time, I'm thinking I didn't see what I saw. And then flash forward, I mean, I knew Ken Gerhardt for years before I even told him my story, because the man literally wrote the book on pterosaurs in Texas, and I didn't talk
Nice.
to him about it because I still didn't believe me. Long story short, yeah, a lot of people have seen these things, and
Yeah.
they're here. They're here in North Texas. They're in Oklahoma. I think they are. I do think they migrate. Like, I think they're only here for a short time and they migrate out. I think they're probably here to procreate, lay eggs, and then they leave,
Yeah.
like sea turtles. And this is why we
Yeah.
see them. They are very consistent in size, shape, colors. Sort of a rusted red brown, or a Payne's gray, or blue gray. Everyone who's seen them has said it looks like a heron at first, or a crane,
Mhm.
or pelican. That's one I heard. I only got one owl, but that's because it was at night and it was so big. They thought it had to be an owl because it was so big. And then it got in front of this poor lady's head beams, and she's like, "That's a pterodactyl." It was actually a pterosaur, but I'm being precise. Her words were pterodactyl,
Yeah.
because she's like, I had brothers. I know what these things look like. Like, this is not a bird. But everyone gives the same description, and literally everyone who's seen them during the day has said, I thought it was, again, pelican, heron, crane, all the same kind of things. And then they get a closer look at the creature, and it's like, okay, we're getting way too. It's like there's too much overlap here. This is the same. They're all about the same size, 8 to 10 foot wingspan.
Mhm.
This is this is a recurring phenomena which indicates a living population. So now I'm here with you.
Yeah.
Hey,
and I'm here to talk about this. Yeah, I'm here to talk about this because after we did that show, and even before we did that show together on the pterosaurs, and I remote viewed it, I had so many people contact me from all over the country, just here in the United States, saying they had actually had a personal sighting. And and let's see, I still have my list of all the people. And so I had people from Chicago, North Carolina, which North Carolina has a bunch of these pterosaur sightings.
Yeah.
South Carolina, Oregon, Texas, Southern California, Georgia, Utah, Hawaii, and Virginia too.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm talking about all over the country, Jason.
Yes, everywhere.
We're seeing these. Okay. And I actually do have some pictures. Now, these days it's hard to tell what's real and what's not when it comes to pictures.
Yes, it is.
Of course. And but I can show, I'm going to pull up the picture that I used for my remote viewing show, Remote Viewing Modern Day Pterosaurs in America. Okay. It's like I'm giving a PowerPoint tonight. But this is kind of similar to what they look like. I think that may be more like
that's a pterodactyl. Yeah,
that's a pterodactyl.
Pteranodon,
but
specifically
a pteranodon. Yeah, like the pteranodon. There was a cartoon my son used to watch about the pteranodons. It's the dinosaur train. So,
yes, yeah. They were. Yeah, my kids watched that too.
The pteranodon, and then also Terry. I think his name was Terry from Pee Wee's Playhouse. That was a pterodactyl or a pteranodon.
Yes.
Right?
No. Yeah. Most of what you see in popular culture are the pteranodon because they are so large. They have a nice big shaped crest. Like they're very interesting looking. And so essentially pterosaurs come in two main flavors, right? Your pterodactyls, which includes the pteranodon, your quetzalcoatlus, and these are much larger. They tend to have crests like that.
Okay.
They have beaks more often than not, and they're very, very large, and they have very short tails like that.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Then you have the rhamphorhactoids. They are much smaller, usually, at least from the fossil record that we have. The largest one we have has an 8 to 10 foot wingspan. They tend to have longer tails, right?
Okay.
And they have and they tend to have a more reptilian looking face. Like they don't have a beak per se. They have teeth. The name Rhamphorhynchus means tooth beaked. And the Rhamphorhynchus, the thing that the species is named for, has a tooth at the very tip of its snout that kind of makes it look like a beak. And the reason this is important is there was a small dragon killed in France around the mid 1400s, and it was taken and put on display in Paris. And about 100 years later, 3 different artists draw a carcass that's supposed to be this thing. Now, looking at it, we can say, because there were 3 different artists, we can say, no, this is a gaff, right? That was put there. But the thing we have to remember is they didn't have formaldehyde. They didn't have a way to preserve this thing. So odds are the creature itself had just turned to dust, and they made a replica. And the reason this is important is there are 3 primary features of this dragon that was on display in these 3 separate drawings made over a 20-year period. That's really important. One, it has a very specific tooth coming out of its nose. Like they put it there.
Wow.
There are 3 claws on the tip of the wing, right?
Okay.
And then they have a very long tail. That is the basic body plan of a rhamphorhynchoid. And it is this time period that when we think of a dragon's tail, it has that triangular shape at the end, right? It is this time frame that this shows up on the wyvern in heraldic art. If you go before that, most dragons have a regular sort of like serpent's tail or a reptilian tail where it's just comes to a point. But it's around the 15th, 16th century that in heraldic art, we start seeing this, what we would now call a dragon's tail. So we have this dragon being killed at the same time that this appears on the wyvern. We have where the carcass about a century later is, again, it's clearly a gaff, but I would suggest it's actually based on what they had. 3 key features that are unique to a rhamphorhynchus or a rhamphorhynchoid, at least.
Wow.
This can't really be a coincidence.
No, I don't think so either.
So
Wow.
I think they did see
Fascinating.
them, and and they've been around. They always have been. And again, they are distinct from a pterosaur, or I mean, well, let me phrase it, a pteranodon, which is what we see in most modern artwork. Which is why when we see them, people drawing them with long flange tails, or they're depicted that way, or people say,
Mhm.
or they'll even say, I saw a dragon. We got to take that seriously. This is
Yeah.
not it's not people just randomly making things up, because if they were making it up or they were hallucinating, it would be something they're more familiar with, which is what they get in the public,
Right.
in you know, in public art, like Jurassic Park or the Flintstones or all those movies. They use pterodactyls and pteranodons because they're giant and they look really, really cool. Well, that's
Right.
a Tyrannosaurus Rex.
That's not, but it's Jurassic Park though, Jason.
Exactly.
I
Exactly.
thought I'd show that.
Hmm.
Yeah. Um, I mean, I think that they were basing that off of something they had actually seen. Okay, because why
Hmm.
wouldn't they? It's just too
Right.
much of a coincidence in my book. Now, when I remote viewed pterosaurs,
Hmm.
I absolutely saw that they have been here all along.
Hmm.
Yeah, they've been here all along, and I got a lot of interesting data out of that. But before we get into that, let's talk about where all they've been spotted in the United States, because I have this
Yes.
nifty little map here, and this is a couple of years old. Okay, so the sightings have probably gone up since then, I'm assuming,
Yes.
because there is a big interest in this topic right now. As I have noticed on social media and people contacting me lately about this, about seeing them. So let's see, the states that are in purple, that's 9 or more reported sightings. Okay, the blue is 6 to 8 reported sightings. The turquoise is 4 to 5. The green is 2 to 3, and the yellow is at least 1 sighting in that state. I mean, it pretty much covers almost all the states, minus, I mean, I'm going to say at least 2/3 of the
Hmm.
country
Yeah.
have seen, and including Hawaii, have seen pterosaurs,
Hmm.
living pterosaurs, um, which is a lot. And a lot are in North Carolina and on the East Coast here,
Yes.
and in
Hmm.
Texas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, we seem to have a group like you said, the East Coast, again, Georgia,
Hmm.
Tennessee, uh, and then you have Texas moving west
Uh-huh.
towards, like, and it's like we don't have a lot of sightings per se, you know, like you said on that map for Arizona, New Mexico, but
Pull it
trust
back
me,
up.
they are there. Like, they are absolutely
Hmm.
there. In fact, I think that's where they're moving out towards. In fact, there's a very specific pattern that I've noticed with the ones here in northern Texas and southern Oklahoma. They do seem to be migrating out out west. We see them in California all the time, and it's not just the United States. We see you have the ropen of Papua New Guinea. You've got the Congamato of in Africa. Yeah,
Okay. Oops.
exactly.
Wait. This one, the
Yeah,
ropin,
yeah,
right, in Papua New
yes.
Guinea.
Hmm. Yes.
Interesting. Yeah.
They've been
That
sighted
was
for
an interesting
years.
story. Yeah, those that was a very interesting story about the Papua
Yes.
New Guinea. I think people, they were eating them there. They made a soup out of one or something. If I vaguely
Yes.
remember that story.
Yeah, they're not caught very often. Well, it's like all these things, right? Whether it's the Mclean Bembe, there's also another one in the Congo as well, that whose name I can never get right, so I won't even try. That seems to be a ceratopsian, but like there
Okay.
was a report of one of the Mokele Mbembe, which is thought to be a sauropod that was killed and eaten and made everybody sick. Um, yeah, there's tons of stories of creatures that are seemingly out of time and out of place from our current worldview, that that just really don't make a lot of sense. The Cadborosaurus, it doesn't necessarily have to have been a which we see in Cadboro Bay. I would argue the Altamahata in Georgia is actually the same species of whatever this creature happens to be. They're probably, I honestly think they're probably more of a Zoolodon, which is a very primitive whale, right?
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where these are all creatures that aren't supposed to still be around, right? Whether it's giant,
Exactly.
giant beavers, pterosaurs, um, they're not supposed to be here according to the mainstream narrative.
The
And that's why
science.
the to
The
science.
science.
But that,
To science.
that's which is why a lot of these reports are very frowned upon, right? It's why they're wiped away. Things are removed, is because if they're still running around, someone's got some explaining to do.
Yeah, somebody's got some splaining to do, because when I did remote view this, I 100% picked up that these things are real. They are here in the United States, and they're in Central America and in South America,
Yes.
Canada. Okay, I mostly picked up North America, Central America, and South America is where my data went. Also, I picked up that they're reptiles. Okay, there are flying reptiles. They had always been here. And I picked up also that the Native Americans actually, this is what they called a Thunderbird. Now, I always figured a Thunderbird was just a gigantic eagle or something on its own. But I was picking up Thunderbird in my data.
And it may be. And the thing is, there's so many weird things seen in the sky, right? Like there are plenty of accounts of giant condors that are what are called teratorns. Again, essentially the wingspan's the size of a bus. In fact, a couple of great stories. If you can go see it on Tubi for free right now. Terror in the Skies, one of the best cryptid, in my opinion, one of the best cryptid documentaries ever made. But there's a long-standing history of these giant birds here in America, but also overseas. The rock of ancient Greek and Mediterranean mythology is essentially a giant eagle, right? So there's a lot of these things. Of course, you throw in things like Mothman, gargoyles, lechusa. Like there's a lot of these giant birds that are seen all over the place. I mean, and oftentimes when they're flying at night, people can't really identify what they are. And I think that's part of this question is when someone says, "Oh, I saw a pterosaur." Well, did they see a pterosaur? Did they see something else? That's how they're interpreting, right? So there is a lot of there's a lot of question on it. But when you have someone tell you, I saw this thing in broad daylight, and this is the description that they give, and particularly there are certain fine details I'm looking for, there's just no way around it. People are still seeing living pterosaurs all the time.
Yeah. And I did when I remote viewed it, I did see that they were nocturnal animals. And that they that's why they're not seen so often, is because they fly above the clouds, and they are they're massive. I was getting a 12-foot wingspan on the ones that I was viewing. I mean, like huge ones. And so I also picked up towards the end that some of them were actually lab made, and I was picking up a lot of data on biologists and scientists and people that were actually creating some of these in a lab. But that doesn't mean that they were all made in a lab, because they've been here for all of time, basically.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, right? Again, I can't speak to where they're coming from. I mean, I'm still trying to grab one, right? But they do seem to be nocturnal. I've got several stories of, I mean, they're very common, particularly in the ropen of Papua New Guinea is most often seen at night. I have several accounts of them at night from southern Oklahoma and here in North Texas, actually just like 13 miles away from where I'm at now. I'm sorry, 40 miles. That was the nighttime one. I mean, a lot of reptiles will move at night. But again, the thing is, we don't really know. Like I said, the ones that I'm the most sort of connected to are the ones that are happening in broad daylight. And the thing about the ones that, again, that I'm encountering and studying here in North Texas, they seem to look enough like a blue heron, right? That people aren't, that they probably aren't recognizing them for what they are. They just don't. And so they're seen and they just kind of go back like, oh, it's just a bird, right? It's just a heron. It's just a whatever. You have to do a double take to recognize it for what it is. Because every single person I've spoken to has said, I thought it was this, and then I got a closer look at it. So I think part of what's helping to keep them hidden is that they just don't really stand out as very odd at first glance. They look enough like, and they fly enough. They do the S-curve thing with their neck. That they just, very, very similar to that essentially they just don't look odd enough for people to recognize them as something exotic.
Yeah. I mean, look at the wingspan on that thing. I mean, that was actually sent to me years ago by somebody on my team who is a very serious researcher who was like, you guys have to look into this picture. Like, you got to see this. This is a dinosaur flying. Uh,
Well, okay, just one of those fine points of detail that I like to
uh-huh.
talk about because I do love this stuff.
Yes.
So they aren't technically dinosaurs, right? We associate them with
Yeah,
the
that's
dinosaur
right.
eras, but they are reptiles specifically. They are distinct from dinosaurs, but we associate them. So I don't have no problem calling them a dinosaur per se, as long as we all understand what we're talking about. I'm good.
Yes, they are. Well, when you look these things up, that's what all the articles are saying, and what people are saying. But they
Mhm.
existed during the Mesozoic era, which would be about 228 to 66 million years ago.
Mm-hmm. So
Yet
what are
they're
they doing
here.
here? Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Yet
Yeah.
they're here.
Well, again, this goes back to the fundamental problem, which is why it's very interesting who gets funding and who doesn't, right?
Yes.
I mean, this is really what it comes down to. There is a war over us, right? Again, not to get overly conspiratorial, but the
It's okay.
there are. I don't think there's any surprise considering what happened at Davos this past week. That there are very wealthy people who have very specific ideas on how the world should be run, and there
Mhm.
are ideas that make their lives easier, and there are ideas that make their lives harder. The sort of popularized, uh, you know, evolutionary, Darwinian atheistic viewpoint is the one that they want promoted. So any evidence that calls this stuff into question is immediately anathema because you
Mhm.
can't look into it. That's why when you have things that are out of place from an archaeological perspective, they got to go away. You can't talk about them. Otherwise, you get in
Right.
trouble. The guy who everyone talks about, there's this woman who found soft tissue. She's not actually the one who discovered it. There was a gentleman who discovered soft tissue before her in dinosaur bones, right? He was
Mhm.
fired because they don't want to talk about it. Now, they can't hide that
Um,
fact anymore, but
right.
the simple fact of the matter is because they can't hide because too many people found it. But
That's right.
soft
Well, the
soft
Smithsonian
tissue,
found it. The
yeah,
Smithsonian, Jason.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And that's the thing is that you can't hide the fact that there shouldn't be soft tissue, active hemoglobin. Like this is stuff they can't hide anymore. So they're kind of having to deal with some of it, but they will suppress this as possible. To Crystal J's question, whether or not they live in trees or mountains, the best I can surmise at this point, because there is a very close connection with, uh, again, like the 10 Mile Creek, right? It is in many ways, it's a narrow, very deep creek. So it filled with limestone. So what happens is you get a lot of air currents through there that will allow them to glide. There's a there is a connection between limestone with heavy limestone caves and uh like valleys for them to catch and glide. That seems to be their primary form of flying. I do think they probably will use trees, but I think the problem is we think of them because they fly like birds, like they roost in a nest somewhere, and that's not. They're reptiles. They don't behave like that. We got to think more like a sea turtle, right? They are moving great distances. They are sleeping wherever they want to sleep for however long they want to be there, and then they go back out for food and mating purposes and migration purposes. So the problem is we can't look for like a nest for them to be in. They are highly mobile, so we kind of have to figure out where their migratory patterns are and set up appropriate cameras to catch them in movement.
That's a good point. You think with all of these cameras, game cameras that people have set up now,
Hmm.
and Eagle Nest cameras and all those things,
Yeah.
you think that we'd have, and all the satellites,
Hmm.
isn't everything kind of watched? And,
Well,
you
there's a lot of
know,
things that are watched that aren't talked about. I mean,
exactly.
that's
Just like with any cryptid, though, or inhumanoids, whatever you want to call them, Bigfoot, Dogman, all that kind of stuff. That's why we know that they know more than what they're saying, and by they, I mean like the government, I think, and
mhm. Well,
whoever's in charge around here.
yeah, that is
Yeah,
that seems to be the real question, doesn't it? And again, it's one of those
it
things
has.
where you've got again. I think one of the reasons the ones that I'm sort of working on, they can hide in plain sight. Again, um, they're mostly nocturnal, but I think they hide in plain sight. But they're again It's a small population, right? Probably what we would consider critically endangered population, and they are highly mobile. And if you don't have a lot of money to go look for them, and you're not really looking for them, um, with a lot of expensive equipment, it's going to be very hard to find. And this is where a lot of this comes from. Again, that's why cryptozoologists don't get funding. It's because
Yeah.
you want to fund those things that support your narrative. And these do
Yeah.
not support any narrative that the people in power want funded.
Right. Right. Well, there's a vested interest in keeping us all in
Yep.
the dark, so to speak. Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, speaking about being in the dark, there's some pictures floating around the
Okay.
internet. And these
They always
pictures,
are.
I can't tell if they're real or not. Okay.
Okay.
I want to say with my skeptical mind, these pictures are fake, but I don't know. Okay. Let's go through and look because
Mhm.
there are like Civil War soldiers with pterosaurs throughout history, allegedly. And there's more than just this picture.
Right.
What do you think about this, Jason?
So this one is actually a known photograph. This is from the show Freaky Links.
Oh, okay.
And
Okay.
that model that's there is actually owned right now by Lauren Coleman and is at his museum. So this specific photograph makes the rounds all the time. Now the thing is, it is a recreation. Like there is this story out there that a large pterosaur-like creature was shot during the Civil War. There's also the one from Tombstone. Actually, I was just talking to Shelley Covington, Montana about this today. It's really a lot of synchronicity around this subject.
Uh-huh.
So there's a lot of supposed photographs that existed 100 plus years ago that no one seems to be able to find anymore. But this one very specifically was recreating this one that's again supposedly exists. But this one specifically it's from the show Freaky Links.
Okay. Okay. Well, there's another one. Here we go. What about this one? That
Yes.
looks like they got one strung up in the background.
Yes, this one's also more or less a proven fake.
Okay.
So yeah, this one, I think they actually found the original photograph of the men. So like the men are there, right? And there was a hunting crew, but they didn't shoot a pterosaur. That was put in digitally later.
Okay, that's how it usually works.
Yes.
And then because whenever we talk about these pterosaurs, people reference these pictures. And I've actually seen it in the chat tonight. So I just wanted to bring these up and show everybody so we could talk about it. Now these it looks like Civil War reenactors right there, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, this one's also fake. Actually, you know what? I'm sorry, this one may be the one from Freaky Links. The other one is just another fake one. So one of those is from Freaky Links, but the other one is they're both fake. Yes.
Hey, they're still interesting to look at. I mean, people are very creative.
Yes,
but it's interesting that they would choose the Civil War era to have pterodactyls, don't you think?
Well, but so again, there is this story of again, there's two stories, one about Tombstone, the other one about Civil War soldiers actually killing one and it being photographed. So this is why this picture, this type of picture keeps popping up, is because there are supposed to be the photographic evidence that these things have been killed in the past and on display. And the problem is no one, in fact, the one from Tombstone, there are a number of people who claim to have seen this photograph, but no one can find it. And exactly. And it's like, well, is it just that everyone's misremembering this photograph, or we don't know. But this is, again, those are two stories that have existed for a long time, which is probably why people are faking them.
Yeah. You asked me to remote view. See, I remote viewed like 3 different targets on these pterosaurs, looking into these things.
Yeah.
Okay. The last target was actually looking for the remains of a pterosaur. And the interesting part of my data was I got Smithsonian within the data. And what that was
surprised.
when I finished this target, I was like, wow, okay, what is this? Okay, Smithsonian, this got to be, it was something about the remains being taken. So if there are any remains, it does not surprise me. I also got that, of course, if there are any bodies, like scavengers got them, naturally disintegrated, all that kind of stuff. But what was found, it is taken and put away somewhere. So, I mean, I really do hope that there are people around the country who, perhaps who found things like this and hold on to them and don't call Smithsonian.
Yes, do not call the Smithsonian.
Don't call the authorities. Just hold on to it. I don't know.
Fact,
Is that horrible? Should I say that on air?
What are they going to do?
Call somebody that you trust. I don't know.
Oh no, I actually have. In fact, we've talked about this on the show. I actually have a plan for if, again, whether it's a Bigfoot or what, while researching, if something is obtained, I have a protocol for this.
What's your protocol? Okay.
Well, I'm not about to say that online. I mean, but essentially it goes down to this.
Okay.
Find several people you can trust. Keep a sample to the side with someone you can trust, like in a freezer somewhere, and then you go live, right?
Okay. Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah.
And you go live on Facebook, YouTube, whatever, and then you go and you somewhere public and say, "This is what I have. This is what I found."
Okay.
Because again, getting it in front of as many eyes as possible is going to be a thing. But then you have a sample saved somewhere off to the side, because things disappear an awful lot. So to Troll's point, right, of a smaller flying dinosaur, I mean, that's the thing. That's why I think there's a high probability for these very specifically is they're smaller. They're not that big, right?
Yeah.
In fact, that's one of the questions I do have about these larger teratorns. Like, you got a bird that big. Why haven't we found one 7-foot long feather, right?
Yeah.
And so again,
Wait, did you say you're talking about pterosaurs because they don't have feathers?
Right. No, the pteranodons, like the giant birds, right? The teratorns. That's my problem. Is why haven't we?
Yeah.
Now I'm willing to. Again, I will give them the same sort of leeway I will give like a Sasquatch, but I think the problem is there's also so much paranormal activity that does seem to take an avian form. I think it's muddying a lot of our data. That's why I'm trying to to focus on the ones that I can more readily try and research and find. And again, if it's at night, unless there's a light on it, I tend to put it in the I don't know category. So I tend to focus on the ones that are either broad daylight or the thing gets literally in someone's high beams while they're driving, so that there's a clear, they can clearly see it. Like I said, it's a very, very consistent body plan, color scheme that these things have and behavior. So again, smaller ones, I do have a question about them when they're like 20 feet across. I'm like, okay, not out of the realm of possibility, but I got some questions is all I'm going to say.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there is that one picture of this pterosaur that a little kid is holding.
Yes.
Well, I know we said we saved this for last, but let's go. Do you want to go ahead and talk about this picture right here?
No,
because I thought that was a grown man when I first saw that picture, but it's actually a child. What do you think about this picture?
This is the only sort of photograph that's supposed to, because this photograph has been reproduced in a number of magazines. It was supposedly from a newspaper in the 50s. Now, the thing is, no one can find the original newspaper, right? And it's been attributed to several different newspapers. But the thing is, we know this predates the internet. My thing is, I think this is, of all the photographs I've seen, this one has the most, has the best probability of being real. And the reason for that is, it's not, this is probably a conversation I don't want to have on air. Let's just say I have some experience with forgeries, not necessarily not cryptozoological, but artwork related, right?
Okay.
And the thing about people who do forgeries, whether it's artwork or money or whatever, you're looking for something. You usually are going to fake something that someone's already looking for, right? Or something exists. Most people, when they fake things, they go with what they understand and know. And this is why, with a lot of these pterosaur, these fake pterosaur images, they tend to be pteranodons, because that's what's in the popular culture, right? Again, that's what's on the Flintstones. That's what's on, all these movies and television shows are the original King Kong had a pteranodon, right? So that's what people fake. This is a rhamphorhynchoid. As I mentioned earlier, they're smaller. They don't have a beak. It has a more reptilian looking face. And look at that tail, right?
Yeah.
It's got a long tail and has a flange on the end.
Exactly. It does. A diamond shape on the tip of the tail.
And if you look at the wings, right? that he's holding, you don't have what are like a bat has, it's his fingers, right? That goes outward. Which is also something you see in a lot of faked pterosaur photos, is they have bat-like wings,
like a web
like
wing or something.
Right, exactly, where you have the 5 fingers going, or the 4 fingers going out in the web, very, very long, and the webbings going between them. A pterosaur has they have 3 fingers, and then they have we'll call it the pinky, and it goes outward,
pinky.
right?
Okay, right.
So it goes, and then it's just pure skin in between. That's what we're seeing here. The things you can say, well, but what about these little sharp edges here? That's the skin folding in on itself, right? Because it's not fully extended. There's enough here to make me at least give it the possibility of being a real photograph. I can't say it's real because we can't find the original photograph. Right? We don't know where we can't prove where this came from. So which again is a little suspicious, right? But there's enough weird about this to say, if someone's going to fake something, this isn't what they fake.
Right.
So I
think
they
go a lot bigger. Yeah. Like
or
the
they
pictures
go with
that we
a
look at.
Exactly.
The pteranodon. That's right. I mean, it does look like this could be real, but I just don't know. Of all the pictures, that is the most realistic. I believe that some of the people in our chat do believe they agree with that actually tonight. So I don't know. I did see in my data that they are real. Absolutely. 100%. And somebody was asking, I was actually reading the topic you were talking, somebody was asking, well, why is the airplane not one? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, again, I think
because they're not always out there around the airplanes.
Yeah. Well, again,
I think they're flying higher than that.
Well, I think the thing is, really, for these, they will stay close to the ground until they need to go for long distances, right? And they're probably assuming for a moment they are the Thunderbirds, right? Or connected to them. It may be that they actually use the updrafts that move in front of a storm to attain that height, because they seem to glide, right? They don't necessarily seem like, they seem to be like a raptor, where they will go, where they will use the air currents to go higher, and they'll climb, and then that's where they're using these air currents to get high and then go for long distances. If they're not traveling long distances, again, probably at night, then they're staying relatively low to the ground, right? They're staying in these deep creeks, or they're staying in areas that have valleys. They may use trees. I have no reason to think they wouldn't just climb up a tree and just jump down. But as far as the again, Werewolf's got a great question, right? Yeah, like, why don't aircraft run into them? Well, think about how rare bird strikes are. Like, they happen a lot, right? But you have to understand how many thousands of flights there are every year. No, or every day. Like, literally, there are thousands upon thousands of flights every single day. And so it's like, bird strikes are not uncommon, but they don't happen all the time. So so now you have something that's rare. Then you have a creature that is probably not going to be where they are, and it's probably going to be flying at a time when there's less air travel. I think there's just a good chance. And here's the thing: what if they have been hit? But if they're being hit by a plane going 280 miles an hour, this poor little Ramphringtoid is now toast, right? It's just a smear on this thing.
Yeah, just like geese. And so I don't want to think about that. That's sad. I like ducks and geese and stuff. I live on a lake, so yeah.
Well, probably not your ducks, or
not mine. Not mine.
Yours.
Mine are safe in the backyard right now. Yes, they're out there quacking. I can hear them.
Exactly.
Well, Jason, Shelley was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about Thunderbirds in the Native American culture.
Yeah. So this is one of those things that's a little. It's probably even. It's not even a peeve. It's one of those things I think we need to, if we really want to move all of these subjects further, we kind of need to stop overlaying a lot of assumptions on First Nations cultures, right? Because the Thunderbird is a sky god in their mythology, right? And again, they're different depending on which tribe you're dealing with, right? It's not ubiquitous, right? People say, well, in Europe, there is no in Europe, right? There's different groups and tribes and nations throughout centuries. Well, it's the same thing here. Differing tribes with differing religious beliefs and differing thoughts about everything. And the Thunderbird was a sky god. And I do find it a little and I'm not the one to usually talk about colonialism or anything like that, but it feels like we are when we say, okay, well, we have this giant story of a giant bird here, or a giant, of a pterosaur or whatever, and the American Indians have this story of the Thunderbird. They must be the same thing. They must have seen that, and just that's inspired them. I think that diminishes their understanding of the world, right? Again, it's not irrational to suggest that um, a culture that's more of a Neolithic culture will have, right? Yeah, we'll see something in nature and myth and make a mythologize it, whatever. We've seen that with the Bongazoo very, very recently, and back in 1995. It's a tree kangaroo that they believed was was sort of an embodiment of their ancestors. It had a lot of religious meaning to them. So it's not irrational to have this thought, but I do think it's diminishing, because if these are natural creatures that exist, then they encountered them as natural creatures, right? And the Thunderbird is a sky god. I think we tend to get wrapped up in trying to explain their mythology and their religious beliefs from a physical perspective, and I feel like oftentimes that's us diminishing their views of reality, right? I think there
Yeah,
is, and again, I think there may even be cross contamination, right? Maybe,
I think so. Could
maybe
be.
there is, right? But I think we're putting this connection on the Thunderbird lore rather than it being a natural extension of what's really happening per se.
Yeah. The Thunderbird is my favorite totem, actually. And
Mhm.
I sell Native American jewelry for, that's one of my side hustles.
Yeah.
And I have my shop with all the turquoise, and my favorite thing, I have
Mhm.
Thunderbird jewelry, and it's my favorite because it's so powerful. It's such a very powerful symbol. And the
Mhm.
Thunderbird shoots lightning out of its eyes, and when its wings flap, it's clapping the thunder and all. It's amazing.
Mhm. Yeah,
So
it
I'm
is a
into the
sky god.
Thunderbirds.
Well,
Yeah.
by the way, I have an admission to make. I'm a huge fan of turquoise and silver. My mom was big on
Oh, yeah?
Southwestern art. I love
Me too.
turquoise. It's my favorite stone. But yeah, I
Amazing.
mean, so yeah,
Me
that's my
too.
only thing is I really think it doesn't do the subject any benefit to necessarily focus on the Thunderbird aspect of it, because it's like we don't even have a sample of these creatures. We don't understand them well enough. I think it's one of those things. It's like, let's just let that be a First Nations religious belief and respect that, and then let's get to dealing with this thing. Now, again, I can't say there isn't a connection, right? Because maybe there is, but I don't know that it necessarily helps us move the story forward.
Okay. I think Shelley agrees with you on that one. Okay. I believe she
Mhm.
does. Okay. Um, yeah, well, have Keiju Ninja 1985, he says, have Native Americans described seeing pterosaurs, and is there a history?
Okay, now that's an interesting question. It's
Mhm.
kaiju. Um, kaiju,
Kaiju. Hey, I'm
yeah.
sorry. Kaiju. I'm so sorry.
Well, so
Kaiju.
kaiju are giant
You
monsters in Japanese
okay. Amazing. I
stories.
did not know that.
Yes, no, it's an entire the
I like
kaiju
that.
is an entire movie in story genre. Um,
Well, now I
Godzilla's.
know.
There you go. Well, it's like Godzilla's original name is actually Gojira. There you
Okay.
go. So yeah,
Man, I
so the
learn something
answer.
new every day, Jason. Thank
There
you.
you go. So the answer to that question is an interesting one, because it's maybe, right?
Mhm.
And the problem with a lot of this stuff, again, we have to understand the word dinosaur does not exist until the 1860s, right? So even with Europeans, they would have called them dragons. Dragons were a valid way of describing
Yeah.
particular creatures up until very, very recently. Sort of, and again, when we talk about American Indians and First Nation legends and lore, the problem becomes we are all translation is interpretation, right? So the problem is we can never really get out of our heads our view of the universe while we're interpreting things. There
Mhm.
is some artwork that is suggestive of a pterosaur. There is this artwork. It does exist. And there are plenty of stories of it. The problem is it's kind of hard to know when we are putting something on the description and whether or not we're bringing a preconception to this conversation, right? So the answer is it's a solid maybe. You know, I wish I had better news on this. The problem is this is probably the saddest part of the entire conversation, right? Besides the ducks and the geese slamming into 747s,
so the airplane
is a lot of, again, we have to understand a lot of these cultures don't really exist anymore. Even if people from that tribe have survived, a lot of their understandings, their beliefs, their traditions are gone because they were essentially wiped out. They've retained some aspect of it. They don't retain everything, right? There's a lot that what makes a culture. Now, unfortunately, this is just how cultures work, right? For example, we have, if you go to the Philistines, right, from the Bible, they were, as near as we can tell from an archaeological perspective, probably they were probably Aegean Greeks, possibly even Minoans that made it to that Israel area, and they adapted a lot of and they adapted and blended with the culture. They retained aspects of their Greek culture, but they clearly became Canaanites, and they were this sort of hybrid version, but they are very clearly Canaanites by the time the Israelites are dealing with them, with just memories of this Aegean culture that they have, right? Okay. So it's the same thing with a lot of tribes, is that unfortunately there's a lot of that material that's just lost because, through the wars, the forced marches, the forced enculturation, a lot of that information is lost. So we are still, even the best we could do is we're still trying to reinterpret what we're seeing half the time. So that's another aspect of this. It's a sad state of affairs, but it is what it is. So again, the answer is, will have the American Indians seen them? Maybe, because there is some artwork that is suggestive that that's what we're seeing. But the problem is the people who actually created that artwork aren't here to interpret that for us. So we're trying to reinterpret it as best we can.
Yeah. Wow. Crystal was saying that in 2017, a plane was struck by something 30,000 feet in the air. I mean, I've been seeing a lot of videos of a lot of UFOs and all sorts of weird stuff that people are filming out of their airplane windows, their window seats.
Yeah, no, exactly.
So, yeah. But I've never seen a pterosaur though. Nobody has filmed one of those yet.
Well, there's some interesting films that are suggestive.
Okay.
And there's one photograph that MUFON has, I wish I could find it again, that I think is suggestive of a pterosaur. But the point is, and there's a lot of accounts of people seeing these things. The problem is, and this goes back to when you get into the weird, freaky things in the air, there's a lot of weird, freaky things in the air.
Yes.
And so this is where you have that ambiguity of, well, are they seeing a pterosaur? Or are they seeing something else that may be a UFO or an orb, or is it something paranormal that's taking a particular form? Right?
Yeah.
Like, this is one of those things that I think we need to include in the math is there are, again, I have no problem calling them demons, but whatever you want to call them, they're paranormal, supernatural entities whose forms are probably not set in stone. And they do like to, and perhaps because that's how they interact with us, or because they just want to screw around with us or whatever, they can take forms that are not necessarily what they really are. And so it messes and contaminates our data. And even the worst part is our own psychology, right? If you're not familiar with something, you don't actually really see it. Your mind fills it in. Like, this is just the weirdest phenomenon, because we think, well, we see what we see. Not really.
Yeah. It's almost like a screen memory, but it's not, because your mind just doesn't understand how to interpret it.
Yes. And if you're unfamiliar with it, you don't know what you're looking at. Your brain will try and fill in the gaps until you are familiar with it. Right. Great, very, very short story, but my wife does a lot of work with as a tutor with children that have learning disabilities. And one of the things they did is they showed us a picture. It's a black and white photograph. And I'm like, this is the weirdest looking Rorschach test I've ever seen in my life. And they said, it's a cow. And all of a sudden I saw the cow, and it was a photograph of a cow, but it was cropped in such a way that there wasn't enough information for my brain to suss that out. Right. But as soon as they said it's a cow, my brain's like, oh, I know what I'm looking for. Right.
Yeah.
So the thing is, when you see something you're unfamiliar with, your brain's going to fill that in. So there may be other things out there, but our brains are filling in information when we see it. So there you go. I mean, so the conversation gets harder.
It does. Well, there's not an easy explanation for any of this.
No.
And that's why it was really fun to remote view it and to see that these are actual real, reptiles, flying reptiles. And Penny, I think Australia would be a great place for these. They probably have them there too. They're all over the world. We had a picture on the show. I couldn't find it for tonight, but they've been photographed in Italy, across Europe. So why wouldn't they be in Australia?
At this point, I don't have any data for that specifically. However, it wouldn't surprise me, right? Because here's the other thing, particularly if they do get larger, right? Let's say, a 12 or even 15-foot wingspan. If they can get larger, then their migratory pattern may be much. Again, look at how far sea turtles will go. We don't know how far these things travel, so it's entirely possible that maybe the ones from Papua New Guinea go down to Australia and then back up. We don't have enough data to say no to any of this or to any theory at this point.
That's right. Well, Jason, this has been fantastic. I've had a great time talking with you about pterosaurs. I hope that you'll come back and we'll talk some more living dinosaurs in the future. But in the meanwhile, where can people find you exactly? Give us another recap.
Yeah, I'm live every Wednesday on Texas Front Porch with Jason Mclean Questions Everything, and every Tuesday on Untold Radio AM with Mysterious Library. SIRUpapers.com. I'm getting ready to update that a little bit. And again, my SIRUpapers YouTube site, for as long as they will allow me to have it. We're going to start doing shorter, more concentrated videos to help educate on a lot of these different subjects.
Awesome. And you've written some books, and I actually have Metroplex Monsters right here. Yes. I didn't type up the other one that you've written, but you guys highly recommend, especially if you live in the Texas area, you're around that, all the cryptids. And so you guys have a lot of goat men. Okay.
We do.
A lot of goat men. Really, what the heck is going on with all the goat men in Texas?
Well, you're going to have me back to talk about that one.
Trust me. I'm bringing you back on. Maybe next time we'll talk goat man in Texas. How about that?
There we go. Sounds like a plan to me.
Perfect. Well, Jason, thank you so much for being here. This has been awesome. It's so good to hang out with you again. Yes, I really do miss doing all those shows with you. So I'm definitely bringing you back soon. Okay.
Hey, happy to come back anytime.
Okay. Awesome. Have a good night, Jason. We'll see you next time. Okay. All right, y'all. Don't forget that right after this show, After Hours has a really cool program. They're going to take you guys on a mysterious journey for the next 3 hours. Next weekend on Off the Trails, I've got William Nighthawk coming on. We're going to be talking about becoming monsters. And I'm going to try to get my buddy Terry Wendell on. I think he's coming from Rock Hill Bigfoot. I'm going to call him tomorrow, okay, and try to get him on. But for now, you guys, I'm the Cryptid Huntress, Jessica Jones. I'm headed off the trail for this week. Y'all please come see me on my YouTube channel, The Cryptid Huntress. I have a daytime show on Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern, and then Thursday night, my remote viewing show at 8 p.m. So I will see y'all this week. Y'all have a good night.